Today on Mother Mayhem.
The armor might keep you safe, but it also keeps the world out. It keeps you from leaning into the messy, unpredictable nature that comes with connection and with love. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the narcissistic abuse recovery podcast for daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray, and I have been trying to think about how to describe this episode to even tell you what it's about. And the first thing I feel I need to say is that this is an episode where we tread carefully. We hold the vulnerability in this conversation. We move lightly, slowly, and with so much grace for yourselves and for each other. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Jules, who I've named after Keira Knightley's character in the movie Bend It Like Beckham. As our letter writer, Jules also plays soccer, and it was the first and admittedly predictable name I came up with for her. Jules is short for Juliet, and can I just say, I have always wanted a name that I could have shortened into some cool nickname like that. In any case, I am now officially adding Bend It Like Beckham to my watch list. When I read Jules's letter, I knew immediately that it was going to resonate with so many of you listening. I see her letter reflected in so many of the clients I work with. Because I think her experience is so universal and so understandable, I do know that it's important to handle this one with some care. Jules, like a lot of my clients and many of you, is professionally successful. She has figured out a lot of her life. She has friends, although admittedly not particularly close ones, but she does have connections that are meaningful to her. She has a hobby and an interest, and she successfully constructed her life in such a way that the impact of her trauma and childhood are not actually immediately visible. She's able to function and engage in the world. She can make decisions. She's gotten some level of insight into herself. And as she referenced in her letter, she has built a life, but she isn't really living. Reading her story, there were a lot of familiar threads to it, and I myself related to some of it as well. The part that really grabbed me in her letter was what I said about how she carefully constructed her life so that her trauma wasn't immediately visible. In reading that, I saw so many of you daughters in that description, and that is what has me using caution and care in this conversation we're having today. Now, before I could use her letter for the show, I had to connect with Jules and I had to share my immediate thoughts to get her permission to continue. What Jules spoke to is a little bit like a delicate house of cards, a carefully built structure of defense mechanisms that her trauma brain has constructed to keep her safe. Each choice and decision was placed with precision, with intention, even if she wasn't consciously aware of it at the time. And I knew that I couldn't pull the wrong thread and risk unraveling everything on her, leaving her feeling exposed and perhaps defenseless. I wanted to respond in such a way that was able to offer feedback and direction while also honoring and respecting the care she has so very much taken to protect herself. And, I don't mind saying this here. The first rule of social work school, like what I learned on the very first day of my master's program, is that we don't ever remove someone's defense mechanisms until we have something to replace them with. And in connecting with Jules, she agreed with me. She doesn't feel like she's walled off. She doesn't feel particularly armored up or unapproachable, but she does feel that she is guarded. And she can be quite rule-based in how she lives her life. Her menu, for example, of what she eats is fairly predictable, and she moves through each of her days in similar ways. She goes to the same places, thrives on routines and rules and structure. And this is what I sensed and heard in her letter, and what I suspect a lot of you probably relate to as well. Those rules and that kind of structure are keeping her safe, but they're also keeping her from connecting to herself, her feelings, and her emotional life. She doesn't take any chances, she plans ahead for everything, and she's always working to be the one in control. She doesn't think of herself as cold or distant, and I certainly haven't experienced her in that way myself. And she mentioned to me that she thinks she's the kind of person who everyone else thinks is better friends with her than they actually are. She doesn't think of herself as a people pleaser because she doesn't go out of her way for others, and she doesn't feel like she compromises herself for others. But she says she does think people always seem to think that she's pleased with them and that they don't really know how she feels towards them. She considers herself to be agreeable, but isn't one to give up what's important to her for someone else. And that, too, made a lot of sense to me. She's largely protected from the impact of her upbringing, and many of you are living the same way for the same reasons. If, as I'm talking about this, Jules already feels a little bit familiar to you and relatable to you, this is my reminder for you to use caution as you listen. I got to get Jules's permission to proceed, but I can't do that with each of you. I'm going to let you know now that we're talking about this house of defense mechanisms that daughters tend to build around their hearts and their emotional experiences. And we're talking about ways of taking those structures and those defenses down so that you all can connect more meaningfully with yourselves and with each other or other people. Now, your trauma brains might already be going cuckoo as you listen to this. And if this feels entirely too much, you gotta give yourselves permission to reconsider whether or not now is the right time for this kind of discussion in your life. I want to encourage you and remind you that you can go slowly, you can pause, you can take breaks, and you can use breathing exercises to give breath to the part that hurts, and you can allow those parts a little bit of release. This is a chat that you want to handle yourselves with care for, and I promise to handle this conversation with care as well. Here's Jules, and I will find you all on the other side. Dear Heather, I have no idea how daughters decided to start to write these letters, where to start, or how much to share. But I guess I want you to know that the first time I remember my father hitting me, I was 7 years old. He wore a suit to work every day and always had a handkerchief in his pocket. They were white and plain. I had fabric paint in a craft kit, and I wrote, "I love you" on it and proudly gave it to him. The rage I experienced from him as a response was immediate. He smacked me across the face and said that love isn't about wasting his hard-earned money, that he couldn't use it anymore, and he threw it away. I ran crying into the room my sister and I shared, and she hugged me and said, "It's just been a bad month for Dad. He didn't mean it." I didn't understand, and she went to get our mother, who sat us both down and told us how Dad had a really stressful job, that his job was to sell cars and he only made money if he was good at selling, and sometimes he was, and sometimes he wasn't, that he was working really hard and we just had to be understanding. That's probably not the first time our mother abandoned us, but it is the first time that I remember. After the handkerchief incident, my sister started teaching me her tricks for how to tell if it was a good sales day or a bad one. And that's when I learned to pay attention to whether or not my dad was drinking and how much he had been drinking. But I didn't always know, or it was impossible to avoid him. That wasn't the only time I was hit or yelled at, and I watched my sister get yelled at and hit also. I remember hearing my mom say to him, not in front of the children, so I know she was hit too. It was a home of chaos and unpredictability. I was scared a lot. When I was 11, my sister and I were invited to stay for a couple of weeks with my aunt, my mother's sister, her husband, and her kids at their lake house. And it was amazing. I think it was the first time I remember feeling happy and safe. My sister and I would actually end up refusing to go to sleep because we didn't want to miss anything. On our last night, I got so sad and so scared about having to go home again that I started crying. I loved my aunt's dog and I went to find it on the couch. I just remember crying and crying into his fur, and my aunt found me and she asked what was wrong. I told her everything. It all spilled out, how my dad got drunk and hit us, how I think he hits mom, and how it's always all our fault. My aunt promised me that she would help me. In the morning, my sister was livid with me. She told me that I had just ruined our lives and that it was going to get so much worse for us now. My sister then told my aunt that I made it all up, that I was prone to nightmares, and that I told the story so that I didn't have to leave, but that she could look and not see bruises, and then said, "Do you think I would lie to you?" My aunt called my mom, and my mom denied everything too. When she picked us up, she said nothing to me, not a word, and she chatted with my sister in the front seat as if nothing had happened. That night, she came into my room and told me that if I ever said anything, I would be taken away from her and everyone in my family. I would lose them and my dog, and I would be moved away from all of my best friends because that's what they do to kids when these things happen. Move them far away, but that she had talked to dad, and he knows that if he does it again, I might say something, so he should stop. And Heather, he actually did. Stopped beating his family cold turkey style, like people quit smoking. But what happened next was almost worse. Almost overnight, my mom created this new facade of us being the perfect family. She redecorated. She turned the garage into a den for dad, and that's where he went after work instead of staying with us. She put us in activities and signed up for the PTA and volunteered. She created this totally false and totally gaslighting version of our family and of our lives. She told me that my aunt never wanted anything to do with me again because I had lied to her, and we stopped seeing other family members too. My sister was her little golden child and mini me. They had their matching hair ties and dressed in the same way, and I was always kept separate. My dad would do these exaggerated movements around me and give me lots of space so I wouldn't be misunderstanding anything. But then I would watch him hug my sister and pat her on the head. I was really good at soccer. My mom would come to every game, cheer at every practice, make all the cookies for all the fundraisers, and did all the mom things. She was so involved, no one ever noticed that she didn't talk to me, that she didn't touch me, or that she was only cheering for me when there was an audience. My dad died when I was 14 from alcohol abuse, and that only made my mom crazier. She became this dramatic, ever weeping widow with two girls, and she would make this big scene of putting on a brave face for her girls, how everything she did was for us, and how she had to be the mother and the father. It was always about her and the story and the show she was putting on. She and my sister were attached at the hip, and I was always just on the outside looking in. I left home on a soccer scholarship and just never went back. I can't say that I went no contact in the way people talk about it in this community. I just knew that I didn't have a home to go back to, so I didn't. I know now that my sister struggles with drugs and alcohol, but we never kept in touch or had any kind of relationship after that summer. I'm 27 now, Heather, and still mostly on my own in the world. I have friends who are the kind of friends you go out to drinks with or to see a show, but not the kinds of friends you talk to about not having a family. 6 months ago, I ended a relationship with a man I really cared about. We got along well. He knew about my family, believed me, and welcomed me into his family. His mom was wonderful. At the time of the breakup, I would have told you that I ended the relationship because I couldn't marry his mom. And while he was nice, he was boring, and I didn't feel love toward him. But it was clear he was feeling that for me, and I didn't want to lead him on. After discovering your podcast 5 months or so ago, I can tell you that my mom drama and my mom shit was all over that decision. I can tell you how it freaked me out that I was starting to connect to his mother, that I didn't trust myself because I was starting to trust him, but also he was nice to me and I didn't know what to do with kindness. I didn't know how to act when nothing was expected of me. I never could settle in my own skin around him. I'm also looking back at a mentorship I had a few years ago. Is it too cliche if I tell you that I'm an interior designer? That I actually help people renovate and create real homes for their families? That's pretty on the nose for a daughter, don't you think? In any case, I had a mentor, someone who was teaching me the business part of design and helping me learn client work and systems and interactions. She had been doing it forever. She thought I had potential and offered me a spot in her firm. I declined, saying that I wanted to earn my spot or something like that. But I know now from listening to the podcast that I was uncomfortable with my attachment to her. I think I saw her like a mom, and that felt bad, or at the very least, unprofessional. So I just cut it off. But Heather, this is where I need your help because I seem to do this everywhere. I self sabotage and I wreck every good thing that comes my way. Something is good, and suddenly I have to shit on it and make it less good. Also, I'm an interior designer. I get lots of shit and samples sent to me for free. I could make the most beautiful home for myself, but I just keep the basics. Mind you, I have the nicest basics, but I do sometimes watch myself fall in love with a piece and then decide it would look so much nicer in a client's home that I'm working on. I don't even know my question. I just know that this isn't good. I can see how I've kept my life so orderly and so predictable, the opposite of how I grew up. I volunteer and coach a girls' soccer team, and that is the best thing in my life right now. I sense that I allow myself that because it's helping other people and it's for them, because I catch myself feeling uncomfortable as soon as it's really good. Average good, I seem to handle. Really good wigs me out. A player I've been working with really lacks talent. That's so awful to say, but she loves the sport and yet nothing is intuitive for her. But she tries so hard, harder than everyone. I've been working with her privately. We were in a scrimmage and she made the most perfect goal. It was exceptional. And she ran across the field to me and got me in a big bear hug. It took my breath. I found myself shaking from the intensity of what I felt, and I wept in my car, sobbing for a half an hour. That moment is why I'm writing to you. I'm supposed to get something about this or learn something from it. That much I figured out, but I don't know what. I can see how I'm like so many of the women who share their stories, who keep things small, tight, neat, orderly, and predictable, who are afraid to live and afraid to not live too. I want a real life and I want to live, and I'm pretty sure I want a family of my own, including a kid who will bear hug me like that and who will want to kick a ball around with me a time or two, too. I can picture that life, but I don't actually picture me in it. I've learned so much from you, but I want every daughter who's ever shared a story to know that I have learned so much from them too. Thank you for Mayhem, and I look forward to hearing from you. Oh my goodness, Jules. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself in this letter. And I'm really, really grateful that you were willing to engage with me and connect with me outside of your letter. I think the conversation that we had after your letter is really going to help me set up my response to you for a little bit more success than it otherwise would have been. And even though now what is coming and what I'm going to say, I want you to remember what I said to the other daughters at the start of this episode. And it's also true for you too. You can go slowly. You can say stop. You can pause. And I encourage you to do so if you need to. You can always come back. When we talked about your letter, I joked that lots of therapists would have had a field day with it. We could talk about your attachment stuff, how you stay connected without actually making real connections, or we could have dug into the pure awfulness of your story. But what really stood out to me is this thread that I see running through everything, connecting all of the parts of your story. And if we can strengthen and build that thread, I believe you'll find more ease and more healing in your life. That thread is the one that connects you to yourself and to your feelings. Make no mistake about it here. Your story is one of overcoming, of resilience, and of one that you can take pride in. You somehow got through something no one should have had to endure. Life with your family was physically abusive, emotionally abusive, and isolating. And yet you pushed through all of that and you built this life that you now have for yourself. I'm never going to minimize what you've accomplished or take any of that away from you. But when I told you that I was proud of what you had done all on your own, you didn't get it. You thought, of course I did. What else would I do? You didn't see your story the way that I did because you couldn't feel your story. It's like you've been on the outside looking in of your own life, your whole life, naming it, listing it, observing it, describing it, but not really feeling it. Probably very much the way your sister taught you and trained you to look at your father and your circumstances as you were all growing up. And all of that makes so much sense to me. That is what living in survival mode looks like. Every time you tried to tell the truth or get help, you were diminished or minimized. You knew what was happening to you and you knew it was wrong and that it was awful. You tried to stop it, but you were powerless because you were just a kid. So, of course, you were powerless. On your own, though, you have figured out how to keep yourself mentally safe. Your family rejected you. They made you the scapegoat and they left you to endure things no kid should ever have to face. And somehow you held yourself together until you could get the hell out and go to college. Your whole childhood, you were alone and protecting yourself, all while your mother pretended to be there for you, adding just another layer of betrayal and confusion. In learning how to survive, you taught yourself for obvious reasons to trust no one but yourself. And while that kept you safe as a kid, it also created some complications in how now you connect to other people as an adult. Your defense mechanisms didn't just protect you from the darkness of your past, they also built walls that kept you from fully attaching to the light in your present. You didn't dwell on your past, but you also couldn't connect with your present. By focusing so much on staying safe, you unconsciously trained yourself not to hold on to anything too tightly. So, not the memories of what you've endured, and not the moments of peace you've created for yourself since. It's a way of surviving that makes a lot of sense, but it's also the thing that's been keeping you from living. Jules and all of you daughters who are in this, I need to directly talk to you about the root of all of this, your feelings. And I know that probably makes y'all roll your eyes. Believe me, I get it. When I say the things that go like, feel your feelings, I know how trite that sounds. And I also know it's something a lot of you hate hearing because if we're being honest with one another, you probably don't even know what that means. And how would you? How could you? Growing up, it wasn't safe to feel your feelings. When you cried, you were told to stop. When you were angry, you were punished. When you were scared or you were hurt, you were ignored or mocked. You learned that your feelings didn't matter, or worse, that they were dangerous. So y'all did what you had to do. You buried them. You built these houses of cards, stacking each piece carefully, holding it all together so tightly that nothing could come along and knock it down. You all survived by keeping your feelings at bay. And that is exactly what you needed to do back then. But now, that house of cards built, well, it's a little bit fragile, right? You're scared that if you let yourself feel even one thing, it might all come crashing down. And you might be thinking, if I start crying, I'll never stop. Or if I let myself get angry, I'll just lose control. And I get it. Feeling your feelings can be terrifying when you have spent your lifetimes running from them. Here's the thing though, back then, it wasn't safe to feel your feelings. You all had that right. But now it's becoming unsafe not to. What I mean here is that those feelings you've been avoiding, they're not going anywhere. They don't just disappear because you're pushing them down. They wait. And as y'all have probably noticed, they find ways to make themselves known, whether it's through your anxiety, through exhaustion, or just this vague sense within yourselves that something isn't quite right. When I say feel your feelings, I don't mean it as a cliche or some trite advice. I mean it as an invitation. I'm inviting you to start connecting with yourself little by little in a way that feels safe. It's not about diving headfirst into every emotion you've ever buried or sitting in sadness for hours on end. It's about starting small. It's about noticing what you feel in your body, a tightness in your chest, a lump in your throat, a heaviness in your stomach, and letting yourself name it. It's about saying, I feel sad, or I feel scared, and then just letting that be true for a moment. And I know it sounds simple, and I also know that it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. And at first, it might even be unbearable. But here's the good news. Feelings aren't as powerful as they seem. They're like waves. They rise, they peak, and then they fall. And the more you let yourself feel them, the less overwhelming they become. You don't have to do it perfectly, and you don't have to do it all at once. You just have to start. Let me be clear here, Jules. I honor and respect your resilience and the life you've built for yourself. I want you to honor and respect it too, because, Jules, I am also honoring and respecting that even though it scares the absolute crap out of you and you don't feel like you know what you're doing, you are feeling ready for more. And we want to honor and respect that too. And the only way we can do that is by appreciating how far you've gotten so far. Your trauma brain has had your back, Jules. It has kept you safe from feeling things when it wasn't safe for you to feel them. We don't want to pathologize any of that at all. You've created order, predictability, safety, all the things that felt absent for you in your childhood. But now you're feeling how that structure is limiting you. And by keeping your life small and tight and neat, orderly and predictable, you're shutting out opportunities for joy, for spontaneity, and for growth. What would it look like if we just experimented a little bit with small, manageable risks? Not tearing down the structure completely, just creating space where it might be a little unexpected. For example, is there a piece of furniture or art that you love that you've been saving for a client, but secretly you might want it for yourself? What if you just let yourself have it? Could that be the first step in giving yourself permission to expand? What if you weren't even ready to have it yet, but you just put it in your home and allowed yourself to look at it in your home while it waited for the next destination, so you could get used to the idea of allowing yourself some beauty and something you might like in your own home that isn't a basic necessity, that isn't a need, but something you just like because it happens to be pretty or cool or hip or however you want to be. So many adjectives could have finished that sentence. I don't know which one. I don't know your taste yet, Jules. I don't know you well enough for that one, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Or Maybe it's something as simple as allowing yourself to try a new restaurant instead of always sticking to your familiar and predictable go-to spot. What if you're not ready to try someplace new, you ordered something different, something you've never had before, just to see if you might like it? Could it look perhaps like saying yes to an invitation that feels just a little bit outside your comfort zone? Or maybe you're joining a friend for a class or a hike or an event that's not one of your usual routines. And what if you just took an extra 5 minutes to linger inside of a conversation instead of just rushing on to whatever was next? Could you let yourself perhaps sit in just a little bit of discomfort of being seen or heard for a little bit longer than it feels easy or necessary? These are the kinds of small experiments that you can take. They're not about abandoning your structure. They're about adding just a little bit of flexibility, creating room for the possibility that something unexpected out of the ordinary could actually feel pretty nice. Think of it as practice. Each time you try something like that, each little step you take teaches you that you can feel uncertainty or discomfort without having to lose your footing. Over time, those little stretches, they can build a foundation for living a life that isn't just safe, but also happens to be fulfilling for you. It's not about throwing caution to the wind. You guys have heard me say this on the show before. I don't want to strip you naked, put you in the middle of Times Square and all your vulnerability and say, hey, look at me, world, here I am. Take your best shot. This isn't what I want you guys to do. But I am encouraging you to slowly learn to trust that you can handle the unpredictability of life without losing your footing, without losing your safety or your sense of self. And if feeling your feelings didn't have you vomiting a little in your mouth yet, well, my next point might. Jules, you want connection. That is clear from how you connected to your ex boyfriend's mom, your mentor, and how you've let yourself bond with the soccer team that you coach. But you've noticed a pattern. When something's really good, it wigs you out and you find ways to sabotage it. This comes from a really human fear that a lot of your fellow daughters here, well, all of you know this pretty well. If you let yourselves fully love and be loved, you all become vulnerable to loss. That moment with your player is such an incredibly powerful example of what's possible when you allow yourself to feel connection, to feel pride, and to feel love. It was intense. Yep, I'll agree with you on that. But also, Jules, it didn't destroy you. In fact, that moment became kind of a breakthrough for you, not just for her, but for you. That hug and the emotion that followed weren't just about her effort and her success. They were about you realizing how deeply you can feel when you let yourself do that. Here's the thing. I know that moments like that can feel pretty overwhelming because they tap into something that you have spent years protecting yourself from. As a kid, emotions like that were dangerous. You got sucker punched in that example you gave me with your dad, and that's not the only example you've ever had. But you've had moments like that where you have just felt something real and true, and as a result, you've been punished, ignored, or left to fend for yourself. So, feeling joy or pride or even sadness would have made you more vulnerable, and vulnerability wasn't safe for you. Of course, you learned to keep your emotions in check, to live in the safety of the order and the predictability and the control. That strategy, my friend, it saved you. And quite frankly, it was brilliant. As a child, it was how you survived. But now, as an adult, it's wearing armor that you don't particularly need anymore. You're overdressing a little bit for the situation. The armor might keep you safe, but it also keeps the world out. It keeps you from leaning into the messy, unpredictable nature that comes with connection and with love. What if that moment with your player is your proof that leaning in, feeling the hug, the pride, the connection is worth the risk? What if the joy and the meaning of it can become bigger than the fear? You might already feel how tempting it is to pull back after a moment like that, to return to the safety and order and the control. That is normal. It's your brain's way of saying, don't get too comfortable, don't let your guard down, don't let the light in. It might leave. But here's the thing, you've already felt that kind of intensity, Jules, and it didn't break you, it woke you up. One way to practice leaning in could be by noticing when you start to pull back or sabotage something that's good. Maybe you catch yourself second guessing something you love or convincing yourself it's better for someone else than it is for you. In those moments, could you pause and ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of here? What do I think I'm protecting myself from? Then remind yourself you've already survived the intensity once. You felt the connection, it stayed with you. You're strong enough to be able to handle it again. Practicing this doesn't mean you dive headfirst into vulnerability. Again, not stripping anyone naked here. We're doing this in small steps. Maybe you let yourself keep something beautiful for your own home as a reminder that you deserve beauty in your life too. Or maybe you're leaning into that moment of connection, whether it's with a friend or a loved one or your team, and you notice how it feels to stay, to be present without pulling away. The truth is here, Jules, that the structured way you've built your life has served a purpose. It created the safety when you absolutely positively needed it the most. But now it's time to explore whether or not that structure is also the thing that's keeping you from fully living. You've already shown yourself that you can feel deeply and that you can do it without falling apart. That moment with your player, well, it was just the beginning. What if you let yourself lean into more of those moments, one single step at a time? And as you do it, remember that you don't have to have all of this figured out all at once. It's okay to be a work in progress. We are all works in progress here in this community, figuring it out together. The fact that you're even asking yourself these questions, writing this letter to me, talking to me about it, and reflecting on your life shows strength. It shows that you're ready. It shows that this is a little bit about being ready to set yourself free and to let yourself feel all of this. Jules, if it's all right with you, I would also like to spend some time talking to you about the connections you've made with other women. I understand how vulnerable it is to allow others to step into a nurturing or a mothering role, especially when that is something that you didn't receive from your own mom. And of course, it's understandable that you're skittish and gun shy about connecting with other women who might be able to help soothe some of your wounds. After all, it feels like such an intimate space, doesn't it? One that's tied up with the history of your mom's neglect and abuse. But here's something that's really important for you to remember. You are allowed to receive love, mentorship, and nurturing from people who aren't your mom. The idea that you only get one shot at mothering through your biological mother is simply not true. You're not bound to the idea that if your mom wasn't able to provide what you needed, that that's it, that that's the end of the story. Like being mentored or being loved on by someone else, whether it's a boyfriend's mom or another trusted woman, it isn't wrong. It's natural. It's a healthy part of being human. Healing doesn't have this one size fits all timeline or formula, and it doesn't need to only come from the people you might have expected it to come from in the past. You deserve to feel mothered, to be supported and nurtured, no matter where, how, or when that happens. It is okay to feel the pull towards that kind of connection. You've been hurt, and now you're trying to figure out how to heal. And part of that healing can come from allowing yourself to lean into those connections that do feel safe and loving, whether that's through another woman who can be there for you or even someone else who's offered you the nurturing you've missed. Doing this and allowing yourself that, Jules, is a powerful act of self love. And that's what you would be giving to yourself if you just allowed yourself to have it. And Jules, I know you're not going to like this, but I have to do this part because we can't leave this conversation without naming the elephant in the room. It is impossible to finish this conversation without honoring the enormity of what you have lived through. Your trauma history is significant. The physical and emotional abuse you endured wasn't just an isolated part of your childhood. It was woven into every corner of your life. You not only bore the brunt of your father's chaos and violence, but you also witnessed the harm he caused to your mom and your sister, and how he created a home that ended up being defined by fear and instability. And then you did what any child should be able to do. When you reached out to a trusted adult for help, when you tried to advocate for yourself and tell the truth, you weren't protected. You weren't believed. Instead, you were accused of lying, ostracized, and threatened with the loss of everything familiar: your home, your friends, your family, even your dog. You were the one being abused, yet it was you who was made to feel like the problem. That's the legacy that comes with being the scapegoat and the whistleblower in a family like yours. You were punished for breaking the unspoken family rule: keep quiet no matter what. By speaking up, you exposed the truth, and the system that was supposed to protect you turned its back on you. As an adult, those patterns, they don't just vanish. For many people who grew up in families like yours, there's always this lingering sense that you're still a little bit on the outside looking in. You might feel like connection, belonging, or even joy isn't fully accessible to you, as you've always been bracing for the moment that it's taken away. And when you've been taught that telling the truth leads to rejection, it is no wonder that letting yourself feel truly safe, attached, or happy can feel pretty terrifying. But here's the thing: that part of your story does not have to define the rest of it. You are not that powerless child anymore. You've survived what could have broken you, and now you get to decide how you want to live. It is not ever going to be about erasing what happened or skipping over what happened, because we can't erase it. I mean, it would be disrespectful and invalidating just to skip over it. It's about reclaiming your story and learning that you can feel safe in ways that you haven't before. You've already taken important steps toward healing by creating this structure and order in your life. That is a strength, one that helped you survive everything around you when it was so chaotic and out of control. But that very structure that's protected you all along, well, it seems now to be stopping you from experiencing more fullness in your life. And it's, you built this fortress for safety. It's sturdy, it's reliable, but it's also keeping out the joy and the spontaneity and the connection. You said you want a real life, and I believe you can have it. But a real life isn't neat, predictable, or controlled. It is messy, vibrant, full of surprises, full of mistakes, full of false starts and starting over and trying again. It is going to mean letting go of some of the predictability and the control that has kept you safe for so long. It's going to mean allowing yourself to feel your feelings, to take chances and risks, and to step more fully into relationships, even when they scare you. But you don't have to do it all at once. Start small. Let yourself keep that one beautiful thing in your home, something that reflects your style, your taste, your joy. Notice when you feel that urge to pull back from something and pause and ask yourself, what am I afraid of here? Then remind yourself of the hug from your player, that moment of connection and pride. It was overwhelming, but it didn't destroy you. It showed you what is possible when you lean in. The moments like that and the moments like that hug, they're just there waiting for you. Little by little, you can start opening yourself up to them because you don't just deserve to survive. You deserve to really and truly live. Your story, Jules, is so familiar to me, and I know it resonates with so many of the daughters listening in. I promise you, we believe you. The strength it took to speak up, to try to find safety in the midst of all that chaos, it is not lost on us. And that's exactly why I've created Mayhem Daughters. It is a supportive online community for daughters just like all of you. Women who grew up in the shadow of narcissistic or emotionally limited moms, carrying that weight of being the scapegoat, the truth teller, or the one who felt everything deeply when everyone else turned away. Inside our community, you're all going to connect over that shared experience, and you all are going to be able to explore what it means to move forward. We're going to be digging into topics like emotion regulation and boundaries, and you're going to find those spaces where you can share your wins and your struggles in real time. It's a judgment free zone where your truth is honored, you're met with understanding, not gaslighting, and certainly not dismissal. This is a space we have created for daughters, all of you, who are learning to trust, to feel, to let themselves want a little bit more, to dream more. Mayhem Daughters is ready to help you take those small, meaningful steps towards lives that you're not just surviving, but you're truly living with, because you all deserve that. You always have. You're going to find the link to join in the show notes. And yes, we are still running Tuesday group. That is a dedicated weekly time for deeper community healing over on Zoom. And you are welcome to join one or both whenever it feels right for you. All of you are in this community of women around the world who are in this together. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. I do hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you have a question you'd like me to consider for the show, please do email me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. You are always welcome to share your story or questions by recording yourself using the voice app on your phone. For best recording quality, please do record directly into your phone without using headphones or Bluetooth speakers. We're building an incredible community as well over on Instagram, and I'd love to see you over there too. You can find us at Daughters NPD. Lastly, if you love what you've been hearing here on Mayhem and have found the show helpful in your own trauma recovery, please do consider becoming a Mother Mayhem sponsor by purchasing Simple Scripts for Saying Hard Things. It's a resource I created that provides the right words for the hard conversations, and it covers life, love, and work. You'll find a link for that in the show notes. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please do share the show with her. Your reviews and social shares help spread the word, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing the show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks so much for your time today. As always, I'm in it with you. Bye for now.